The ink has barely dried on the police reports, and the internet is already turning Charlie Kirk's assassination into a breeding ground for conspiracies. Mossad, trans ideology, CIA ops, pick your package of paranoia. In the chaos of half-truths and AI hallucinations, Grok is spitting out fake quotes from the shooter's father, while ChatGPT takes to a different narrative. We're no longer just watching conspiracies grow in the shadows, we're watching machines amplify them in real time. And that's where my guest today comes in. Mick West has spent nearly 2 decades dissecting the mechanics of conspiracy and belief. Why a UFO's anomalous movements can be explained by parallax, why a pilot's 99.9% certainty might be nothing more than expectation bias, and why human error is often dressed up as divine revelation. He's gone from programming video games like Tony Hawk Pro Skater to becoming the world's most famous UFO debunker, accused of being a shill, a cover-up artist, and even a PSYOP agent for a shadowy cabal. But here's the darker question. When reality itself feels like it's collapsing, from conspiracy storms around assassinations to Air Force vets swearing they touched God through a glowing egg, to Pentagon officials openly talking about fighting Satan, how do you debunk without becoming a villain in the very mythology you're trying to dismantle? Today, we're digging deep into the eye of the storm. Conspiracies, assassinations, UFOs, cult psychology, and the terrifying overlap between spiritual longing and political delusion. Mick West, welcome to the show. Mick West, thank you for joining me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, so you've written a ton on conspiracy and conspiratorial thinking, and I've had the pleasure of going through your book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, this past week leading up to the conversation. So I have to ask you, because we're in the eye of the storm, it seems, right now with the Charlie Kirk assassination, and that's where speculation tends to dominate before the facts settle. What have you been seeing the past week in terms of people's reactions to the assassinations and the insane breeding ground that this can lead to for conspiracy?
Yeah, I think with the Charlie Kirk assassination, what we're seeing is basically people trying to project their own, what they want the outcome to be on it. When it first happened, obviously it's going to be very bad for, if you think of one side or another side, that there's really just exactly two sides here. But liberals would prefer it not to be a liberal, and right-wing people would prefer it not to be someone who is right-wing. And so you're getting two sets of people kind of amplifying things in the other direction, and they grasp onto any little thing that can push it in that direction. So if someone, the memes that were on the bullet casings and things like that, initially they were grasped onto as the 3 arrows being an Antifa sign, and then later you discovered is actually part of a weapon summoning cheat code, not a cheat code, a weapon summoning in-game code, up, left, down, I think. And people are being very quick to rush into what they think things are. But on top of that, you've got all the normal kind of conspiracy theories that people will always come up with in these cases. For example, people thinking that it wasn't actually him that died, or that it was somehow staged, or even that the whole thing was, some kind of CGI or something like that. You're always going to get things like that, and it's going to be expected. But because you've got this very heightened national state where you've got, kind of this, culture war, but also in a way the right wing of the Republican Party seeing an opportunity to capitalize on it, and the left wing's desperately trying, the left trying to not be tarnished by it and to try to move forward from it. It's a very complicated situation that's very rapidly evolving.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like people latch on to these tiny details, and then it's almost like a contest of who could weave the most captivating fiction that turns into a conspiracy around the situation. Like, I saw one guy that edited an entire video based off of 2 guys that were moving their arms behind Charlie Kirk when he was speaking, and I think one guy scratched his face, and another guy
Yeah.
kind of raised his arm for a little bit, and then you saw a third guy off to the side, and this person was saying that, like, that was the actual bullet, like, this guy raising his arm to shoot Charlie Kirk, and, like, the first 2 guys were, you know, signaling him somehow when, they're just scratching their face, as I'll probably do 45 times throughout this episode. So it's it can be entertaining, but it's also chilling to see the rapidity and
Yeah.
the willingness to believe when these things are spreading.
And it's really kind of an accelerated form of, something that's been around for a long time. You think back to the Kennedy assassination, and people eventually were poring over the Zapruder film and every little detail in that and little reports from that. But it took a long time, before even people even saw that film. And here we saw the actual thing, basically
Yeah.
within minutes, if not seconds, of it actually happening, because people were uploading it to social media in fairly high resolution. So people were, he was probably, still on his way to the hospital while people were analyzing the video and coming up with new types of theories about it, whereas it would have taken months and sometimes, even years before people got a good look at the Zapruder film from the Kennedy era. And of course, with social media now, things grow much faster, and people know that. People know that you've got to kind of jump in there if you want to kind of get ahead of the game, or if you want to, get your theory to stick. But also, like, conspiracy theories are kind of like viruses in a way, in that the strong survive. It's a process of evolution, natural selection, and random mutation, and is what evolution is. Things change over time, and the weak ones die off and the best ones survive. Now, with conspiracy theories, that's something that used to happen on a long time scale, because the feedback loop was quite slow. People would have to print their circulars and mail them out, and maybe make a TV show and then get some feedback. But now you've got this thing that happens over the course of minutes and hours, where a conspiracy theory can come up. It can go out onto X, and if it survives, then that becomes the dominant strain, and the weak ones die off, and it happens very, very rapidly. So it's like this kind of accelerated evolution of conspiracy theories, which is something very new in society.
Yeah, and going back to the grainy footage of the Zapruder film versus some of the more high quality footage that exists today with assassinations or attempted assassination attempts, I feel like that's something you also see in the UFO community, where people say, like, the reason for so many conspiracies is because the footage is not high quality, but as soon as, like, high quality footage comes out, then there, like, it'll be clear that, like, it'll be obvious. But we're seeing, an attempted assassination in 4K and an actual assassination in 4K, and still, like, that didn't do anything to stop the conspiracies from generating.
Yeah, but we know from the mainstream, it's kind of a different thing, because with the assassinations, we know that it happened.
Yeah.
Where we saw what happened with Trump. There's still, it's somewhat more ambiguous than Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk obviously was shot and killed. No one's really disputing that, except a few very extreme cases. But with UFOs, it's kind of the other way around. We're not trying to disprove something by a conspiracy theory. It's almost like you're trying to prove something by a conspiracy theory. On the
Mm,
one hand, we have this very strong evidence, proof essentially that these things happened with the assassinations. But with the UFOs, we don't have that evidence. And so
mm,
it's kind of like the opposite thing in a way. And the thing is, you would expect to have that evidence. Yeah,
yeah.
everyone's got these cameras everywhere, and we saw, like, there's plenty of footage from the Kirk assassination. There's probably quite a bit more that people still have on their own personal phones, and they're probably sharing with authorities and didn't want to share it with the media. But we just haven't had that with the UFOs. So it's kind of like, I think that's very much a clue as to what's actually going on
Yeah.
with UFOs.
You mentioned the conspiracies, whether it's with Charlie Kirk or in other cases, essentially being projections of what people believe. Do you find that it's not only a projection of what people believe to be true, but also their deepest fears? Because, like, just like looking back on the past week, if people say it was Mossad that took out Charlie Kirk, my inkling is to say that this person thinks that like this dark cabal of geopolitical figures control the world and are sort of like killing people, but then also placing people where they want them to go. And then you have the other theories, like the trans ideology, like it was, there's this unfounded wave of trans people killing people with assassinations or school shootings, which statistically is not the case. It's not even really relevant when it comes to like trans school shooters, but people, it seems like they like have some like deep rooted fear that they're also expressing besides
Yeah.
just their core beliefs.
Well, I wouldn't really call it a fear. I mean, it still really is just a belief. It's something that they dislike and they think they can fight against it. But, in some ways, these beliefs, what it gives people is a sense of control and understanding of the world. They think the world is being this scary place where things happen kind of randomly, which is kind of what it is. And by having an actual enemy, a clearly defined enemy to rail against, then it kind of makes the world a simpler and easier to live in. Not that it's easy if like you've got trans people killing everybody, which is what some people believe, which obviously isn't true. But they have an other. They have like the other people that they can see as being the enemy. Really, what's the big thing here isn't really so much trans people. It's immigrants and legal and illegal immigrants, and essentially forms of racism as well.
Yeah.
And this is something that's kind of something that goes back thousands of years. This is just the exact same type of society turning against other people and having someone to dislike. Going back thousands of years, it's quite often like the Jewish people, but also just other ethnic minorities within a country or migrants from other countries become the target that you can pin your woes upon.
Yeah.
And so by having an enemy, it in some ways makes life better for you because you got something to actually blame your ills upon, even though really it's just the vagaries of modern life which is causing your problems.
Yeah, it is like a self-soothing aspect, like almost like a baby sucking their thumb in a way where you like have this belief that it's more comforting to identify an enemy even if that enemy is not true or not the full picture, rather than to have a more dispersed, nuanced view of, you know, out of the millions of problems that exist in the world, there could be millions of enemies or millions of things that we're fighting. It doesn't all just come down to like one thing.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of reminds me of one of the first things I started writing about, which is this thing called Morgellons disease.
Mm,
And that was this kind of a set of symptoms that people said was a medical condition, and it was related to people finding small fibers in their skin, and seeing they would get little microscopes and they would look at their skin and found fibers. But what there really was people having what doctors called idiopathic symptoms, which are symptoms which don't have a definable cause. And one of the most common ones was itching. You're itching. I'm just got a little itch on my neck right now.
yeah,
The majority of itching, especially like kind of itching that people go to the doctor for and the dermatologist for, is idiopathic. I think it's something like 30 to 50% of all itching cases are idiopathic. But when it becomes like this serious condition that people start fixating on the itching or it gets really bad, that's not a very satisfactory answer. They want to
yeah,
know what is causing what is wrong with them. And so they go searching for it. And then they end up, if they find something that someone who says, oh, this will explain your ills, you've got chronic Lyme disease, or you've got heavy metal toxicity, or your chakras are out of alignment, or you have Morgellons disease and you have these nanoworms like burrowing through your blood. Hearing that there's an explanation for what's going wrong with you or what's going on in the world, becomes something that makes people feel better and having a sense of control and just less worried. It's kind of weird.
yeah,
It's less worrying to have a diagnosis of something. And many people will have
yeah.
this thing. You wouldn't go to the doctor. You want someone to know. They want them to know what's wrong with you. They do some tests and they say, "Oh, well, your test came back normal." It's not very satisfying.
Yeah.
You actually want something to be wrong so you know what's actually going on. So people go for looking for things that are wrong in the world, just like they go looking to the doctor to see what's wrong with them.
There is a humorous aspect of it in a sick way where you have someone going into the doctor's office and the doctor tells them you're completely normal, but in the back of their mind they're like, please let it be the nanoworms in my brain. Like that'll just ease all of my anxieties, like basically hoping for like this terrible thing. But to them, like the answer is the cure.
Yeah, well, they want a cure ultimately, but
Yeah.
you feel like, if you have the answer, you can start working on a cure. If you know that it's Morgellons, then you can get the anti-Morgellons medicine from Prison Planet or wherever you get your medicine from. So it's like it sets you on a road to perhaps curing it. Whereas if you've no
Yeah.
idea, it's not good. And so that kind of the same parallel exists with conspiracy theories like 9/11. 9/11 was this huge event. There was this terrible, incomprehensible thing. People couldn't understand how could, relatively primitively equipped guys from another country where they were living in caves have like hijacked 4 planes of the most powerful country in the world. How could they have flown, into the buildings? How could the buildings have collapsed the way they did? They don't understand how it happened, and so they go searching for an explanation. And since the real explanations are found of kind of very complicated and difficult to grasp and somewhat incredible, they go for the easier explanations, and they go for explanations which match their worldview. They already think that there's this secret cabal of people running the world. It's a very small step from there to think that, the secret cabal has probably plotted this whole thing. I know that makes a lot more sense. And then they go, oh, well, the buildings fell in this really weird way. That must be explosives. So they just
Yeah.
go looking for things that fix their worldview so they can understand what's going on and know where to point the finger.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this in your book with one of the 9/11 truthers that you spoke to, but the guy that fell down that rabbit hole, he credited one of the videos of this YouTuber slash steel worker put out a video where he was essentially explaining that steel doesn't have to get as hot as you think it does to start bending, like it kind of
Yeah.
like loses. And it's, like, it popped up on my feed, but, like, a year ago. So this this is, like, 18 year or whenever he posted, like, 13 years after this guy finally posted it, but it was it might have been a minute-long video, and you would think that a conspiracy that could be unraveled by a guy turning the camera towards his, working desk and record a 60-second video and completely debunk it would just, like, poof, the whole thing would go away, but, like, some people do it does kind of shake people towards the truth, like the guy in your book. But for other people, it just like that becomes part of the conspiracy.
I'm going to put this steel in the back of this anvil, and I'm going to lift this 250-pound anvil with this bar of steel. Do you see how the structural steel is supporting this anvil? Okay, now, in my furnace, I have an identical piece of half-inch bar of steel, just like this. And it's going to be around 1800 degrees, just 300 more than jet fuel, when it comes out. I'm going to take my pinky finger, half-inch solid steel. Check it out. It's a freaking noodle.
Yeah, it kind of varies on how deep people are into these things. There's a lot of people kind of get into the conspiracy theories via a relatively superficial thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they find out what the melting point of steel is, which is like, I don't know what it is, like 3,000 degrees or something like that. And then they find out what the temperature of an office fire is or any building fire, and it's less than that. So say it's 2,000 degrees. And they do the math, and they say, oh well, obviously the fires could not have melted the steel beams, therefore the building could not have collapsed due to the fire, therefore the official story is a lie. And so
Mm.
they've got this like very simple proof. And then maybe years later, they see this video of this blacksmith, and he just says, "Look, I'm just heating this steel up in my fire, and it loses all its structural strength. He bends this steel bar just like by pushing it gently with his hand."
Yeah.
And then they go, "Oh, that first thing I believed wasn't actually true." But that's someone who's got into the conspiracy theory via this relatively simple I think a lot of people, once they get deeper in, kind of the natural selection and the evolution of the conspiracy theory will affix that, so that
Yeah.
they'll be able to find an explanation for that, and they'll be able to say, "Oh well, we're not saying that the jet fuel melted the steel beams to break them. What we're saying is that there was molten metal in the building, and we see this like flowing out of one of the corners at some point, and that's what we're talking about. That's the
Yeah.
steel." Yeah. So there's always a way out, and there's always a modification you can make to the theory to help it survive in the new environment.
Yeah, and it seems like with the new world of AI and deepfakes, we're having modifications that not only aren't based in reality, but you can kind of like produce your own modifications with certain types of software that's now available to billions of people. And you ran a little bit of an experiment that you tweeted about. You asked Grok and ChatGPT the same question about Tyler Robinson, the
Hmm.
shooter in custody for Charlie Kirk. And you asked Grok and ChatGPT about the shooter being a far right troll, and you said that Grok leaned into the idea much harder than ChatGPT, responded more quickly, and then Grok made up a quote from Tyler's father. And it just leaves me thinking, like, if the media is already fractured, what happens when AI starts amplifying these fractures? Like,
Yeah.
are we fucked like completely? Like,
No,
what's
it is a big problem. I mean, but it's kind of like in some ways a temporary problem. We'll probably have bigger problems later. But right now, people don't understand that ChatGPT isn't like a search engine. It's not just looking things up on the internet and telling you these things. It's basically synthesizing, and Grok the same, synthesizing things from sources and from what it thinks is the case. So with the case with Grok, I was asking, like, is he a groiper? This kind of right wing trolling organization or a group of people, and it made up essentially this quote that's from his father, saying, like, I can't remember what he said, but it basically said, in Newsweek, Robinson's father said this thing. And I was like, oh well, where do you find that? And he said, oh well, here's a link to the article, and he gave me a link to the article, and so I went and looked at the article and said, can you quote from the article where he actually said that? And then Grok was like, on second thoughts, that quote doesn't actually appear in the article. It must have imagined it.
yeah.
And this is something you see with Grok more, I think, than ChatGPT. Is they're kind of living in the moment. They're just they've got a whole bunch of things coming in. It's kind of slightly. It's like they're on drugs or something. They're just very very scatterbrained, and they're very 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 rapidly doing things, but perhaps not the best way. And I think a lot of people just don't realize that this is what's happening, and they take the first answer that comes along, and often they will have phrased the question in such a way that it kind of leads more towards that answer. And if you
Hmm.
phrase it a different way, or if you ask it to check more deeply, or if you ask a different AI, like you ask, you know, um, uh, ChatGPT instead of Grok and vice versa, you'll get a completely different answer. So I think people are just not aware of this yet, and as they become more aware of how AI works, they perhaps be less of a problem. However, AI is getting better every day, and it's actually getting more and more, uh, you know, like the answers are higher quality, but in some ways the bad answers are higher quality as well, and it's going to become very difficult for people to distinguish these things. This is a problem in all areas where AI is used. Like, I'm a computer programmer, and I use AI to write the boring bits of the code sometimes, but then sometimes it will make up something that works but is really, really slow or something like that. And if you don't know what you're actually doing, you don't really understand what it's telling you, you just accept it and you move forward, and you've got this really crappy bit of code in your program just because you think that is right, and it is right 90% of the time. But when it's wrong, it's very wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't speak to Grok as much because I've mostly used ChatGPT if I am using one of those models. But I have noticed that unless I'm super direct, where I want a quote that's directly lifted from a source word for word. It will just feed me approximations without telling me. And I'll say like
Yeah.
this is not what this person said. Like, why did you do this? And it's like, oh, I've been giving you, basically like the general gist. Would you like me to find the actual quote? And I'm like, yes, I want the exact quote. And it's also very, there's a lot of positive affirmations with ChatGPT. It will never tell you that you have a bad idea unless it triggers like one of its
Yeah.
content warning things. Like you could get it to tell you to basically do anything and it'll like positively affirm you. And I wish it was, I mean, maybe I could do this with prompts, but like, I don't really think it's a good thinking partner. I know people have advertised things where they're like, I'll, use my custom GPT and like, this will be your business partner. And I'm like, I don't think at this point, like, it would be a good idea to have such a positively affirming thing, like, be your partner in anything.
Yeah, I think it can obviously be very useful. I mean, I do use it for research and for coding, but you've really got to be aware of its limitations. You got to know that this is something that it's just a mindless robot that's just trying to give you the right answer, but the way it's doing it is very, very rough. It's kind of interesting just people think of these AIs as being robots that are programmed in a certain way, but they're programmed now with just English language prompts.
Mm,
The actual, essentially the highest level code that lies behind it. You've got this massive, essentially neural network, billions and billions of connections. And then lying on top of that, you've got some code that's saying like, be polite to the user. If he asks about suicide, then tell him not to do it. And it's just these very simple rules that can go wrong because they're just English and they can be interpreted in various different ways. So it's not like we've got like this fine-tuned control over exactly what these robots do. It's very, very rough. Now, some types of when you're kind of coding a bot, now sometimes you've got to think, how do I phrase this in such a way that it returns the right answer? Whereas if you were coding it in with actual code, you can be very, very precise.
mm,
But I created bots that you don't actually get code for. You kind of you could fall back on code, but then you lose all the advantages of the language interpretation, and you have to like just add all these qualifiers on it. If it's this, then this. And then try to be like more. Give an answer that includes a number, and if the answer doesn't include a number, then go back and do it again because it didn't work the last time. And you get this really soft and ridiculous kind of code that's bound to go wrong. And there's
mm.
lots of bots and lots of implementations of things that are essentially coded using this very, very sloppy, forceful, loose language, and it's going to cause problems.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the deepfake side of AI generation, is that making it more difficult for you to debunk UFO videos or get to the bottom of what's actually happening?
No, it's not. And the reason why I think is that a video. We've always been able to fake videos before. Fake videos going back to probably the 50s. And people know that you can fake videos. So if you get a video, you've got to have some kind of provenance of it. You've got to have like the background. Where did it come from? When was it taken? Who took it? And when you do have that information, 99.9% of the time, it's good. That it's a real person. It's very, very rare that you'll get a hoax that's sophisticated enough to include, like, say, multiple witnesses who claim to have taken things, and then original video that has been created in such a way. There was one, I think the best one that's ever been done was by, I think, this group of special effects artists called the Corridor Crew.
You may have seen this UFO video circulating Reddit 4 months ago. This tiny little dot flying across the frame captured the attention of 100,000 people in a matter of hours and had them believing in aliens. But here's the thing, I faked it all.
And they created a Tesla camera video of a UFO, and it was this small blurry dot. But what they did was they got it off two cameras, so they got it off like the front camera and the side camera. And so they did the whole thing. They downloaded had the car drive along the road. They took the video. They kind of photogrammeted the ground to get motion tracking, and they built a 3D model of the environment, and then they inserted an object in the 3D model, and then they found someone on Reddit who with an account who could verify that this was the footage, and they kind of tried to replicate the metadata of the Tesla, the video, so it all looked really, really genuine. And then they had someone else within the crew, and they tried to fool them, and it worked. So you can do it, but the amount of effort it takes to actually create a compelling hoax is pretty huge, and so it basically almost never happens.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any existing cases where people have been fooled by a fake like that that's of any significance. Because if someone actually creates a video that's really compelling, there's going to just be more and more attention on this thing until it's determined whether it's real or not.
Was there anything like before you found out that it was this channel? You said the Corridor Crew that created essentially like fake this Tesla UFO sighting with multiple Tesla cameras. Did you see the video before they came out and admitted they faked it and go like, "Holy shit! Like, there's actually something here," or did you see something off about it when
Yeah,
you
I
first saw it?
didn't. I saw it. I didn't actually pay much attention to it because it didn't actually look that impressive at the time. I didn't realize that it was like two cameras that were kind of like, that synchronized. And by the time I actually figured out it was out there, they'd kind of come out with the explainer video. But I know a lot of people on Reddit got really into it, and they thought this was like the holy grail. Yeah,
Yeah.
here's high quality video from two cameras. This is what Mick West has been asking for. No one already told me about it, that there was two cameras.
Yeah.
And people started to like reverse engineer it, do 3D models based on the fake video, so they could figure out where this thing was. And it worked. This object is there in 3D space, and it does do this maneuver. So it's real. So in that sense, it's that you come to either it's fake or this is a weird object doing something amazing in the sky, and it turned out it was fake.
Yeah.
And more analysis would have discovered that the metadata wasn't quite perfect, and there were probably some clues in the compositing as well. But yeah, there probably will be at some point even better forgeries. But the ones that we look at are almost all ones where we have very good evidence that they really happen. And the thing is, we haven't got a video that's unambiguously anomalous.
Yeah.
Videos are either identifiable or there's not enough information to identify what's in them, and there isn't enough information to demonstrate that the object is doing something anomalous. And that's really what we're looking for. A lot of ufologists, I think, are in this kind of post-evidence stage of ufology, and they say, "Oh, we don't need evidence anymore. We don't need to analyze videos because we know it's true. I mean, look, we're having hearings in Congress, therefore it must be true. Therefore, we should be doing, we should be, I don't know, knocking on Lockheed Martin's door, or we should be setting up an intergalactic council ambassador."
Yeah.
But no, we're not actually there yet. We're not post-evidence. We're still looking for evidence because the evidence we have is ambiguous or wrong.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about one of the videos that came out recently that there are a lot of people, even people in Congress, that consider this video anomalous. It was played by Representative Eric Burleson. It's the Hellfire missile versus UFO video. He played it at a
Yeah.
recent House UFO hearing. It was presented as an orb continuing to fly after being struck by a missile. And Lou Elizondo came out and said, "We've never seen a Hellfire missile hit a target and bounce off."
It's so
What,
ridiculous.
what were your thoughts on this video when you
Well,
first saw it?
it's a missile hitting a target, and the target breaks into pieces and falls out the sky. I mean, it's presenting it as if the missile bounces off is just ridiculous. The missile changes direction before it hits the object and kind of after it hits the object, and that's probably just the missile tracking. These missiles, we see on the video that there's a laser designator, which means that the drone that we're seeing that has the camera is shining a laser at this target, which has a kind of a pulse-coded sequence, which the missile locks onto. So it's got like this kind of flickering laser, and it says like, oh, it's 2 shorts, 3 longs. That's my target. I'm going to go for that one. A bit more complicated, but basically that. And so that it's trying to seek this thing. So it's making adjustments, based on the wind and where it thinks the target is. And so it's coming up and it gets a bit closer. It sees other targets over there. So it's making a little adjustment at the start. Then it hits the target, doesn't detonate, which means that it's probably a soft target, something like a balloon or something like that, or an aerostat, kind of a blimp. And, flies through it, doesn't detonate, because to detonate these missiles, they need to have basically a strong G-force. So it needs to rapidly decelerate. So it needs to hit something, basically. And then the circuitry inside will detonate. Because otherwise, it gets buffeted by the wind or something, or hits a bird and it will detonate by accident. You don't want that. So you want to make sure it's hit the target, the plane or whatever, the ground usually, with these missiles. Now, the collision has been described as it being invulnerable to the missile, or the missile being split by the object. I don't think that's what's happening at all. This is the missile coming in here. It's quite smoothly kind of comes in and like bashes through the object. The object kind of like takes damage and falls to pieces, and then this bit starts tumbling and maybe changing shape, and these bits are kind of like falling along behind it. And it didn't do that, so it flew through. So when it flew through, now it's kind of no longer got this good track on the laser thing, and so it changes direction as it hits, because it's getting all these confusing signals with the laser coming up, and so just slightly different direction. That's kind of appears to be all there is to it. And we see the object itself. It kind of starts out as this fairly rigid-looking shape, which is not entirely clear if that's the exact shape. But then after it's hit by the missile, it kind of goes kind of floppy and kind of starts flopping around a bit, like it's a partially deflated balloon.
Yeah. And you could see the pieces kind of break off, Yeah,
and it looks like there's a few bits of debris. There's actually like 6. You can only see 3 clearly in the video, but if you get the original video that was presented not the original, but the best quality video that we have available, I've actually asked Eric Burleson if he could release the video, but he hasn't replied to me yet. But they have the best video. But there's a whole bunch of bits of debris, and you kind of see that the object's being hit. It kind of starts to fall. You can see it's getting lower down on the screen, and the lighter objects kind of hang behind. People get confused though, because there's a couple of things that are going on. One, people think, oh, if it's a balloon, then the missile would destroy it immediately. But that's not really the case. Like the missile could have gone close to the balloon. It could have hit the payload beneath the balloon, if that's the actual target, or it could have just missed it entirely and just kind of like disrupted it and kind of ripped it a little bit, or it could have just winged it. Like Donald Trump's ear was winged. It didn't. It doesn't necessarily mean that nothing happened. It just means that it wasn't a direct hit. So people think the balloons pop. If you stick a pin in it, it pops. Sure, that's true with a regular party balloon, but it's not true with Mylar balloons. Take a Mylar party balloon and stick a pin in it, it doesn't explode. It just starts to leak. Because when a balloon has a semi-rigid canopy, like a Mylar balloon, which doesn't really stretch, or an aerostat like a blimp, they have a very, very low overpressure. So their pressure relative to the atmosphere is basically the same. But a balloon, when you blow it up, it's this rubber thing. Lots of pressure is required to actually expand this rubber balloon. Sometimes it's quite hard to blow these balloons up. You're putting an extra half an atmosphere in there sometimes. But with these aerostats, it's very little. So if they get a hole in them, it just kind of flops around and loses its shape rather than explodes.
Did you see anything anomalous about this video in particular, or was it something that you would expect to see a missile hitting a balloon.
Well, the actual impact like that isn't anomalous, and not quite sure exactly what we're looking at, because we've got this heat signature which seems fairly hot, and it kind of seems like it's oval shaped, and then it kind of rotates around. But yeah, that might be just the balloon. And it might be just it's kind of knocked out of shape when it gets hit. It does seem a little bit hot. It seems like it's glowing hot in the thermal footage, but that could just be the contrast between the balloon, the large balloon being heated by the sun, and the cold ocean, far below. Because thermal cameras, they're very contrast based, so it doesn't take much for something to appear very, very bright hot, saturated, next to something that's dark, very cold. The missile itself seemed to be moving a little slow for a Hellfire missile, but that's probably because it's not moving straight across the screen. It's actually moving like away from the screen, essentially. So it starts like at the camera or near the camera, and it's moving away. So the path appears to kind of like move more than it actually is moving, and it seems to be moving slower. And then, of course, it looks like it's moving very, very fast. This object looks like it's whizzing across the surface of the ocean. But this is very similar to the old Go Fast video back from 2017. And that video looked exactly the same. It looked like it was moving very fast. Turns out it was actually not down by the surface of the ocean. It was halfway between the ocean and the camera. It's exactly the same thing with this. We actually have the laser rangefinder figures on screen, and we can see that it's like 6 miles to the surface of the ocean. It's 3 miles to the object. When we go back to where the collision actually happened, back here, and see what happens to those numbers. Right now, they're at 3.4 and 2.7. And if you go to where the collision actually happened, we can see they're going to go from here, we are 3.1 and 2.4. They're going to go to boom, 6.1 and 4.6. And what's actually happened there is that this laser designator that is used to guide the missile to the target is also doing a range finding. So it is telling you how far away the target is. Now, the target has been knocked out of the reticle here, so it's not tracking the target anymore. So it switches from tracking the target, or giving you the distance to the target, to giving you the distance to the ocean. And you see it goes from 3.1 to 6.1 and 2.4 to 4.6. It's doubled, which means that this object is not down by the surface of the ocean, which would be 6 nautical miles away. It's just halfway to the surface of the ocean. Because we see at some point it changes from tracking the object to tracking the ocean, so we can see the two different distances. And from that, you can figure out, we've got the horizontal distance as well. You can see exactly how high it was. It was at 12,000 feet. And the drone itself was at 24,000 feet. So it's got this perfect parallax illusion where the drone's moving, the object isn't. So it looks like the object is moving very, very, very fast. And if someone actually did an interesting video where they took that video and they removed all the background movement. So they just kind of isolated the missile and the object and then the fragments. And it just looks like something hanging in the sky, hit by a missile, knocked to the side, and then bits of it, falls down to the ground. And I think that's really all that's happening there.
Because the moving ocean behind it is part of the parallax effect.
Yeah, it's an illusion. The object itself need not be moving at all. It could be like perfectly still. I mean, it's probably just drifting in the wind a few like tens of miles an hour. But it doesn't appear to be, there's no real evidence that it's moving fast. And the fact that we've got these debris, not just, there's 6 bits of debris, some big bits and some small bits, and it seems consistent with it just like, something being hit. Debris doesn't go very far because it's very lightweight, and then it just all starts to like, sink down.
Yeah. I think the first time that I heard someone explain the parallax illusion was the Go Fast video that you mentioned.
But is it, as they say,
hauling
That's
ass?
exactly my point.
It's a little less than 2/3 the speed of sound.
hauling ass and 2/3 the speed of sound? No, it's not even close. It's going as slow as 20 to 40 knots. Just wind speed at that altitude. We can determine this with some slightly more complex analysis.
And it seems like this comes up pretty often when it comes to UFO videos, especially those that are over bodies of water.
Yeah.
For people listening to this who might not be familiar with parallax, why is it such an important thing to understand when you're looking at UFO videos like this, like the missile or the go fast?
Well, parallax is apparent motion that is caused by the movement of the camera or the movement of the observer. So if you've got like, say two objects, one's like 10 feet away and one's 20 feet away, and you're looking at, say, the first one, you move your head to the right, the object behind it will look like it's moved to the right. And
Mm.
this is especially compelling if you're over water or if you're over, you're looking up in the sky, you have no background, no frame of reference. And also, if you look at the background object, you keep focus on the background object and move your head to the right, it will look like the object that's closer to you is moving to the left.
Mm.
And it kind of looks like it's moving at about the same speed that you're moving. And since it's over something like the ocean and you're really zoomed in, it looks like it's moving as fast as you're moving. So this object that we're seeing in this Hellfire video, it kind of looks like it's moving at the same speed as the actual drone with the camera is moving. So it looks like it's skimming over the surface of the ocean at 300 miles per hour, which is the top speed of the drone. It's going to be going somewhere between 200 and 300 miles per hour. So that's what you get, this visual illusion. And if you don't realize that this is possible, there's all kinds of like mistakes you can make with parallax. A lot of people might have seen one famous, not famous, but like very cool illusion. If you're driving along kind of parallel to the landing path of planes at an airport, you see a plane coming into land, and you're you're driving forward past it. It can look like that plane is hovering in midair.
Yeah.
And it can be a super compelling illusion. And there's several videos online that demonstrate this. It looks like it's a glitch in the matrix. It looks like that, and some people actually think it is a glitch in the matrix, but it's just parallax. It's this apparent motion, or in this case, the lack of motion, caused by the movement of the camera or the movement of the person. So if you were to stop, the illusion would just vanish.
Mm.
And that's why you only see these hovering cars, hovering planes. If you were in a car driving in the opposite direction, you'll never see it if you're driving in the same direction, because it'll just make it look like it's moving a bit faster. So it's something that's responsible for a lot of illusions, and it's something that people don't understand. Even some of the people who claim to be analysts, UFO analysts, don't understand it. There's a famous case called the Aguadilla case in Puerto Rico, sometimes referred to as the Puerto Rico UFO. But that's the same type of thing. There's a slow-moving object, probably a couple of fire lanterns, Chinese lanterns, just kind of drifting in the wind about 10 miles per hour. And there's a plane flying around it in a circle. Now, we know the plane's flying around in a circle because we have the exact coordinates of the plane, but we don't know the coordinates of the thing in the middle. So when you look at it, it looks like there's something skimming over the surface of the island at the same speed of the plane. So people think, oh, there's a UFO flying at 200 miles per hour over the ocean. And there's actually a point in the video where the camera is tracking the ground more than the object. And the people who did the analysis, they're called the Scientific Coalition for Ufology, or UAP studies now. They said, well, because the camera's not moving, then this proves that the object must be moving, and therefore it's moving at 500 miles per hour. And they did all this math. But it was completely wrong, because they failed to understand that the camera was mounted on a plane, and planes can't stop moving. So it had to be moving. It was just, it was just turning the angle of the camera. So it's difficult to explain these things without visuals. But I think a lot of people, for some reason, they don't understand how it works.
And I'm gonna throw in some visuals when for the YouTube version when this gets released for sure. But I could see, like, someone like myself who's just a general lay observer. I had never heard of parallax before I heard you explain it in a Go Fast video. But even if I were to see it, it would still like send a signal to my mind that like something is like something crazy is happening, because how often is the average person looking out of a drone camera or have the perspective of a pilot? Like, you never do that. Whereas like if something happened from the passenger seat window of a car, like if it was something that I'm seeing on a regular basis, I might be a little bit better at discerning the sort of like illusions and movement associated with that. But you could see how quickly something could spread because, like 0.0001% of the population has like ever been a drone operator or a military pilot. Like how would they know what this illusion is?
Even the drone operators get mistaken. I've heard from people who've talked to these drone operators who are convinced that a very fast object flew past their drone. And because it can be a very compelling illusion if you don't know exactly what's going on, and it doesn't happen very often. Like you're in Iraq or wherever, or Afghanistan or Syria, you're flying your drone, maybe from somewhere else, and you do it for months or a year or so, and nothing ever happens, and then one day this silver sphere like zips past your camera. And the first time it's happened to you, and you think, oh, what the fuck? That was just some kind of weird UFO just flew by, because it's the only time that it happened. And this is, it's the drone operator, sure, but this isn't something they see every day, which is, this is how UFOs work. It's the things that don't happen every day. People don't recognize them. They don't understand what's going on. So even the drone operators kind of need to have some education or experience, or, maybe like simulator versions of these events. So don't feel bad just because you get fooled by these illusions, because they're very compelling. I've recreated one with like a camera on a gimbal tracking an object that I suspended over my pool, and it looks like the object's moving. And I can't tell it's not moving. It just looks like it's moving, but I know it wasn't, because I've got video of me moving the thing and the object's just hanging there. So you got this 2-camera proof that it wasn't moving, but it looks like it is. So it's understandable, but it's also a problem.
Thank you for making it this far in my conversation with Mick West, but you're only halfway through the good stuff. In the second half, available right now on the ZachShow.supercast.com, we dive into why even elite pilots like David Fravor fall for perceptual errors that cause 30% of military accidents, and how shared illusions may explain the most famous UFO sightings. We also get into Mick's VR project that drops you inside Fravor's Tic Tac encounter to see the illusion yourself. And lastly, we get into how ufology is drifting into mysticism, from Stephen Greer's summon UFOs with meditation to a veteran who swears he retrieved a godlike egg. To get the full episode, head to thezachshow.supercast.com today. That's where you'll gain full access to the uncut Mick West conversation, plus exclusive AMAs, monthly essays, the Zarchives, which are 31 locked bonus episodes behind the vault, full audio and video of every future show, the ability to suggest guest questions, and more. That's the ZachShow.supercast.com. I'll see you there.